Hello and welcome back to the World Leader Leaderboard, the podcast where we rank every politician to tell you who's winning and losing each week. This week I'm joined by Rory.
Hello.
And Nadja.
Hello.
How are we both doing?
Very good.
It's a weird episode.
Very weird.
You might have noticed it's Monday today rather than Wednesday when we normally release. And for various internal reasons, we've messed with the schedule a bit. We're recording this on Friday. So there's a whole weekend between us and you. And hopefully nothing crazy happened because we're going to look silly. However, as things stand, this is how the leaderboard currently looks. And throughout this episode, we're going to be moving people up and down based on their performance over the last week to recalibrate, readjust, and reappraise. That's our new catchphrase, the three R's. I'll write that down, someone. As always, let's start our episode by moving people up with our winners of the week. Okay, Rory, let's start with you. Who is your winner this week?
So my winner of the week is a new addition, which is very exciting and maybe a controversial one.
A controversial new addition?
Well, not a controversial new addition, but maybe a controversial winner.
Okay.
So my winner is Jong, North Korea's supreme leader.
Okay.
I think I've been thinking about this for a few days, and I think I'm confident with my reasoning. So I think that the US and Israel's strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities has sort of, I'm going to use the word vindicated very carefully, vindicated Kim Jong-un's sort of non-negotiable pursuit of nuclear weapons for North Korea. I think if you look at he will be looking at how vulnerable non-nuclear armed states have been to American intervention, like Iraq, Libya, and now Iran, and thinking, I need these nuclear weapons to keep my regime secure. You know, Iran went down a diplomatic route in the 2010s and signed the nuclear deal with the Obama administration, and it was largely working. But a new president came in, Trump, scrapped the deal, and then within a decade, Iran was being bombed by the US and Israel. So Kim can say to all the voices saying, "Come on, negotiate. Let's denuclearize." He can say, "Well, look, Iran tried to negotiate, and look what happened to them. I'm definitely not going down that road." I think on top of that, the US strikes in Iran, he's going to be closely watching the assessment of how effective those were. He's going to be thinking, how effective were those penetrating bombs at destroying Iran's underground facilities? Do I need to have better air defenses in North Korea? Do I need to dig deeper bunkers for my facilities? And do I need to sort of really get more help from Russia, China, for example, in terms of military capabilities? Because if you look at what happened with Iran, no one came to Iran's defense. So I think it has sort of, to any voices within North Korea, and I don't know if there were any that were saying, let's not go down this route, but also to the international community, he can now point quite clearly to Iran and say, look, I'm not giving up my nuclear weapons.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
I was unconvinced, but I am now convinced. Kim Jong-un being added to the board, being added to the lightly positive section of the board. A real who's who of that level. What an odd lineup we have there. So on both points, let's start with kind of the second point of he'll be looking at how effective the US strikes were. We're a couple of weeks on now. Do you think there's any real conclusions to draw from that, or is it still too soon? Still too soon to tell.
It's still very much being debated within the US government, and I think the fact that Trump is so angrily saying no, it was really effective, and everyone else is wrong, suggests that it wasn't as effective as he is saying it is. That initial US intelligence report, I think it said maybe set Iran back a few months in its nuclear program. So I would say
big.
No.
And this will have, as you say, motivated a number of countries potentially, but Iran especially to maybe pursue quicker. So even if it set them back by, even low numbers of years, you could argue that, well, sure, that's obviously bad for Iran, but they're going to be going way faster after as well. They at least might be motivated to go way faster afterwards.
Yeah. And I think, this is sort of a separate point, but the fact that Trump can stand there and say, my own intelligence chiefs are wrong about this, and no one is sort of resigning over that or being fired. I just don't think you can have that difference in opinion between the president and the intelligence community without someone saying, this isn't sustainable. But maybe over the next few weeks we will get a clearer picture. But at the moment, I would say it leans more towards that slightly less impactful.
Yeah.
Conclusion.
Another win for Kim then, doesn't need to dig
guess so.
deeper bunkers. And do you think this will have kind of broader ramifications globally? Obviously, as you say, North Korea already all in on nukes.
Yeah.
And obviously a real edge case. There's not many North Koreas around the world. But you said, and I think it's true, that other countries will be looking at this, comparing how different countries are treated, the different attitudes. And there certainly could be a perception that North Korea and countries like them are protected because of their nukes, and therefore Iran's approach didn't work, and more countries maybe are incentivized to pursue a nuclear route. Obviously, North Korea is an edge case, and like that not every country could pursue nukes even if they wanted to. But do you think this shifts the calculus for anyone?
Yeah, it's hard to think of other countries that would be in a similar position. Because if you take Iran, for example, it had Israel as its main adversary and the US, but that real hostile relationship, the relationship between North and South Korea is very different.
Yeah.
South Korea isn't like really eager to bomb North Korea in the way that the Israeli government has been.
Yeah.
Has been about Iran. But yeah, I can't really think of any other examples.
Yeah.
I mean, there has been talk about nuclear proliferation since Trump's return, sort of separate from the Iran thing, because the countries that have traditionally been under the US nuclear umbrella are slightly worried that maybe that won't be so ironclad. You get like Germany,
but not
South Korea itself.
Kind of more normal, less rogue state kind of energy, like the countries that would tell you they were doing it, rather than like a country suddenly springing up with nukes because they've learned from Iran.
Yeah.
Nadja, I'm interested your thoughts, because I think we both reacted slightly shocked to this edition. Have you been swung?
Yeah. No, I think it does definitely set a precedent for the way rogue states may act and the way they handle their nuclear programs. I do think, in the sense as well, that the whole Iran-US, the US bombing Iran, has kind of shown the cracks in between this kind of Iran, North Korea, Russia axis that was kind of being talked a lot about probably last year, and like a kind of, I think we did a video on it, and the fun was something called like Axis of Evil or something like that.
Sounds like
us. And I think it does kind of find it. I think it kind of weakens the whole idea of that axis in terms of Iran got bombed, no one really went to their aid. Russia, even though Iran's been supplying Russia with weapons for most of its war in Ukraine, I think the foreign minister of Iran went to visit Russia a few days or the day after the US bombed them, and there was nothing really, no actionable plans that they could take except offer a few words of condemnation towards the US. And so I don't know, maybe Kim Jong-un in North Korea, who's maybe been looking to Russia and Putin as some kind of ally, if he's now seeing the way Putin's reacting to the strikes in Iran and not really doing much about it, kind of not turning his back. I mean, who knows what's going through Putin's mind, but kind of turning his back on Iran, not offering any further assistance. Maybe Kim Jong-un feels slightly a bit more uneasy going forward on how much North Korea can rely on Russia or specifically on Putin, which maybe, either will force him to be more, force North Korea and its nuclear program to be more self-reliant, or he'll end up, I mean, we'll see what happens, but he's probably feeling a bit uneasy at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm struggling to find that video. I know we did make it, but we make so much great content.
It's true.
I did just find we made a video at the end of last year, though, called Why Iran Has Had a Terrible 2024.
Oh, no.
Looking forward to the follow-up on that next year. It's getting worse. But yeah, you're right. That is interesting. And I think we'll have to see how different countries react and how this shakes out, because as has been reflected already, we don't have all the answers yet. And we also don't know how even this situation will fully resolve. We know things seem to have calmed down, obviously, but like the underlying tensions certainly haven't gone away. So we'll have to keep an eye on it. But for the moment, Kim Jong-un, a winner, added to our board and in the lightly positive section. Nadja,
Yes.
let's move to you. Who's your winner this week?
So my winner of the week is the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky. It's essentially because during the NATO summit that happened earlier this week, Trump U-turned once again, saying that he and his administration are considering sending Patriot missiles and defense aid to Ukraine. And this is a pretty significant turn. Obviously, we all know what happened in the Oval Office a few months ago and the actions that followed with that, outburst between Trump and Zelensky, and then the suspension of aid or the suspension of intelligence sharing. So it's interesting to see how that relationship did sour over the past few months. But now it seems that with Trump struggling to end the war in Ukraine and now being a lot more overtly blaming specifically Putin for his struggle, it seems that he's kind of perhaps coming around to Zelensky a bit more. They had conversations at the NATO summit to which Trump characterized as a very friendly conversation. Zelensky's a very friendly man, which is, typical Trump. We can't expect anything much else for him. This whole U-turn and very turbulent kind of actions or whatever. But it is a stark contrast to what was being said earlier in the year.
Yeah.
And that's probably, definitely good for Zelensky at the moment, knowing that he might have swayed Trump enough and the American administration to get them back on side. So aside from that shift in tone, the NATO summit also was good news for Zelensky in the fact that the 32 countries, I think, did agree on a 5% increase to 5% of GDP expenditure on defense. That's good for Zelensky and specifically for the European nations who have agreed to that 5%, because it's effectively saying that we're supporting kind of Ukraine's plight in the war, and if it comes to the point where Russia does invade a NATO country or whatever, we're ready for that. And it's just good in the sense that if Europe is becoming more self-reliant when it comes to defense, that's just good news for Ukraine. It means that Ukraine doesn't have to rely on the US for military assistance, and it means that their neighbors are probably more than willing to provide even more military aid, which is definitely needed now, considering there's the war in in the Middle East and everything have shifted attention away from Ukraine. So this 5% is good news for them. And finally, another reason why Zelensky's a winner this week is that in general, things are not going too well for Putin at the moment. There's been reports that after the Russian economy kind of overheating, that's starting to slow down a bit, and inflation is posing a real big risk, which is not good news for Putin. So yeah, that's why he's winner this week.
Nice. Okay, Zelensky moving up from the neutral spot also to lightly positive, right next to Kim Jong-un. What a lovely place to be. You mentioned this very briefly, but I'm keen to dig a bit deeper because I think a lot of people will have seen attention shift away from Ukraine, seeing what's going on in Israel and Gaza, obviously the Iran situation and kind of conflicts around the world. And recent months and weeks, the narrative has been, attention shifting away from Ukraine. That's bad for Ukraine. People are forgetting about them. Obviously, though, NATO this week and your move on the board suggests that attention is maybe shifting back. So you want to reflect a bit more on why that's happening? Why is Ukraine more in the spotlight and why is it getting more attention now, do you think?
Well, I'm not sure if Ukraine is specifically more in the spotlight, but if it was, it would be a lot to do with the fact that the NATO countries have decided to commit to this 5% defense target that Trump has set. When Trump first, or one of his, I can't remember who was first in his administration to mention the 5% target, but when it was first mentioned a few months back, everyone kind of scoffed at it, like, come on, that's just not going to happen. Like, there's absolutely no way we can, the amount of cuts that will have to be made to reach the 5% target, even though there are some countries, particularly all the way in Eastern Europe, that are meeting those targets. Everyone's like, no way is that happening. Like, definitely not. And then over the past few months, that's completely changed. Now, all these countries have said, largely in part because they don't want Trump to essentially destroy the alliance, I guess, that yes, we'll commit to 5%. And that's probably, that massive commitment is definitely what would be dragging Ukraine back into the spotlight. Because essentially NATO was created to, sorry. NATO was created, decades ago to, some might say, to protect the western flank from Russia and from the Soviet Union, or the eastern flank were also packed countries. Yeah. So I guess this 5% is really, pushing that whole idea that Russia can very well attack NATO soon, which Trump has even said. Trump said this week that there is every possibility Russia can attack a NATO country. So that's another reason why Ukraine would definitely be back in the spotlight now. But yeah,
it's interesting Trump's attitude towards it and towards Ukraine more generally. It's so back and forth. And this is what you come to expect from Trump. But kind of day by day, you don't know whether, if Russia were to attack a NATO country in the next months, as some are speculating, what would Trump's reaction to be? And it seems like it depends which day of the week you catch him on more than anything else. Rory, do you have any thoughts on the back of NATO, more broadly? Obviously, we've got the 5% target. We've got the Ukraine situation and the kind of shifting relationship with Zelensky and Trump. But was there anything particular that stood out to you?
I think with the Ukraine, sort of Trump's slightly warming up to Zelensky and turning a bit on Putin, it's that thing where, whoever he views as the main obstacle to a ceasefire, I think is when it's the one who gets all that sort of angry tirade from him. Is like with Israel-Iran just a few days ago, when he was having a go at both Israel and Iran because they both seemed to break that ceasefire a few hours after it was announced. If Zelensky is viewed as the obstacle to peace, which is I think what Trump viewed him as early on, then that's obviously why that relationship deteriorated. But he does seem to have changed his mind on that, which I think is obviously good for Zelensky.
Absolutely. Okay, cool. Well, Zelensky then moving up, as we say, and those are our winners this week. Before we move into the audience's suggestion, a couple of quick shout outs, and these are both special and exciting. So if you've got a tendency to skip forward, I wouldn't, because they're special and exciting. The first is we've been talking for a while about our next issue of the magazine, Too Long, and the fact that the next issue, the one coming out in August, is our End of the American Order special. And eagle-eyed viewers will have spotted both in the background and on the table copies of the magazine. Whoa, I'm out of frame. I'm so excited. Here's what the front cover looks like. We've shown you before, but this is an actual real copy. I can't show you the inside yet because most of that isn't complete and I don't want to give you any spoilers. But I just wanted to show you a physical copy. This is how it looks. There's this orange spine to go alongside your other fun Too Long spines if you've been collecting them. The microphone's miles from my face, I've just realised. Apologies. But yes, just a shout out to the magazine. And if you want to pick up a copy, you can head to the website. There's a code on screen right now, which will get you 20% off. That's additional to the 20% off you get for subscribing. So you could get a big old discount if you subscribe right now. But yes, new copies of that coming very soon. The second exciting announcement is these notebooks that you might have seen us writing in. In fact, I think all three of us have one right now. No, Rory doesn't.
It's unbranded.
But you can scroll back through years of videos and you'll notice these notebooks popping up. These were made for the original Too Long, the first one that came out in December 2023. And we still have some. And we thought, considering we would like to kind of have some more fun merchandise around, we thought we'd give it a trial of putting some of these notebooks up on the store. There's only 10 of them, so they're extremely limited edition. So if you'd like one, then they're great. We write in them every week. They're lovely notebooks, hard-bound cover. Soft paper. Very soft paper. And it comes, they're getting real QVC now. It comes with a little loop for your pen, and you don't have to supply your own pen either. We'll do that for you with a Too Long branded pen. Look how long that Too Long is. It's crazy. So if you're a big fan of the magazine or the channel more broadly and want to pick up a copy of the Too Long notebook, there's only 10 of them and they're on the store right now. Okay.
Only 10?
Only 10. We would, that's not only 10 because we're trying to be cool in limited edition.
Yeah,
it's only 10
actually only
because we've written in all of the other ones because they're such good notebooks. We could order more, obviously.
Yeah.
And we may, if people like them. But right now, there are only 10. Let's move on to the audience suggestion. Okay, so every week we let the audience decide one person who either add to the board or move on the board, and that's based on the comments from the previous episode. The top comment on last week's episode was suggesting Mark Rutte, so as such, we will be adding him to the board today. Where will he land though? Is he a winner or a loser this week? Is he going to be being added to lightly positive or lightly negative? Rory, I'm going to start with you. Mark Rutte, winner or loser this week?
So
Also, maybe quickly explain his current role to anyone who's fallen behind.
Secretary General of NATO, so big job.
Formerly Prime Minister of
the Netherlands. Yeah. So initially I was thinking he should be a winner because, NATO allies agreed to the 5%. Trump was happy. He spoke kindly about NATO. The summit went off without any sort of public blow-ups. But the more I sort of read about it and was thinking about it, and also I sort of wrote a bit about it in one of my 2 long articles, link in the description.
Very nice.
I've kind of convinced myself that I think he should be a loser this week, and I'll explain my thinking. So the summit was so focused on pleasing Trump. They did everything to keep him on side. He had a sleepover with the Dutch king, basically. He was I think the only leader that got to stay in the Dutch royal palace.
Wow.
They shortened the length of the main plenary session, apparently because the US team asked for that. Then Mark Rutte did these extremely sycophantic text messages to Trump, congratulating him on bombing Iran and saying no American president could have got European countries to pay this much in defense, blah, blah, blah. And then obviously the infamous daddy comments. Daddy sometimes needs to use strong language. Horrible.
Yeah.
Daddy diplomacy.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's not mine.
God.
I didn't come up with that.
Quickly distancing yourself.
But I think all of that sort of overshadowed the fact that actually strategically it was really quite thin what came out of the summit. The every NATO summit, they have a sort of joint statement. This year's one was 430 words. Last year's one was 5,300 words.
Wow.
Ukraine got a passing mention in this year's one versus, a full section in the last one. The mention of China that was in last year's one got dropped this time round. I just think in its attempt to please Trump, it just sort of ignored a lot of really important things, including the 5% target. The real question now is how do European countries actually reach that? And how do they, I think we made a video about this, rather than just spending more, how do we make sure we're spending money on the right things, European integration on defense, that type of thing. And I think those questions went unanswered. I think fundamentally, I just don't know how an alliance like NATO, which is meant to be sort of centered on collective defense and a commitment to each other's defense, I don't know how that is compatible with the constant need to flatter Trump to keep him on side. I think if the next 3 or 4 years of NATO summits are focused on flattering Trump, they're not going to get anything done. So for that reason, I think Mark Rutte should be a loser. And the daddy comment, I couldn't put him up for that.
Just true.
Yeah.
Nadja?
I was going to put him up as well. And I still need to think whether Rory swayed me, but I do definitely think Rory's swayed my opinion quite a bit. There was also something that, which Rory just reminded me of, which is the fact that what Rory was saying that, the NATO alliance, it's transatlantic, it needs to be collective. Everyone has to be fair on the same page. But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the 5% doesn't even actually apply to the US or to Trump.
Yeah, I tried to find this out because, the US signed the agreement that said we agreed to spend 5%, but Trump just said, I don't think we should spend 5%.
Yeah.
So I guess that means they're not going to do it.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Which is crazy. And then
no one else wants to either.
Exactly.
And he's going to go around being like, Europe's not spending enough. The whole argument falls apart.
It's
surely.
Silly. It's so silly.
Yeah, I think his logic is that we spent loads previously, so we shouldn't have to. But
well, sure, but
it's not very solidarity.
Come on.
Yeah.
Well, then Mark Rutte, he got questioned for that, for the, not just the daddy comments, but also for the fact that...
As he should.
Also the fact that he's set a 5% target for an entire alliance, which that doesn't apply to Trump. And then Rutte's, his logic behind that was the fact that, they bring a lot to the table when it comes to security tech and stuff like that. So they don't, whatever percentage that they fall under, they make up for it in terms of security tech, which is okay, that's fine. Whatever you say, right? But then also, what Rory was saying with the whole statement that they released like annually, the fact that Russia just wasn't at all, it was Russia and Ukraine was just passingly commented on, when, as I've mentioned like just previously, the entire point of the NATO alliance is to protect Europe from Russian threat or whatever. And the fact that it's only mentioned like so passingly just shows that maybe the whole point of NATO is now dramatically going under a transformation. And we'll see how far that transformation does end up going. That's definitely a blow to Rutte. And one more final thing that I'll say is that Rory's completely right. Yes, everyone's agreed to a 5% target. Where does that money come from? I mean, it's very easy, and this is more of a problem for national governments. It's very easy to agree on 5%, but that money has to come from somewhere, and it'll very likely come from welfare cuts or cuts in education or health or whatever, which definitely will not go down for the electorate.
Yeah.
And that could be bad for Rutte in the long term, because these national, the Europeans will feel, I don't know, they might have a more negative perception of the alliance if it means that their daily lives and their cost of living goes up.
Yeah.
Because of defense. So, I thought he would be a winner for me this week, but I have to.
You've only said negative things. Really.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
You putting him down?
Down, yeah.
Okay, Mark Rutte being added to the board in the lightly negative section, which is pretty rough. He's had a busy week. He's been in the news a lot.
He's in a bit of a rut.
The things that he said.
Sorry.
He did do the things he said he would do, but I don't know.
Yeah, but in order to achieve them,
at what cost?
He had to say some things we don't approve of. So, okay, speaking of losers, let's move on to our losers of the week. Rory, let's start with you again. Who is your loser this week?
My loser of the week is Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission. She's had a bit of a difficult week. So there's this perception of her as the Queen of Europe because she is very powerful and has sort of consolidated power. But in the last week, that image has sort of been tarnished a bit. So about a week ago, as of recording, the Commission abruptly announced that it was going to withdraw some green legislation that's, I think, was anti-greenwashing, an anti-greenwashing law, and that announcement came after pressure from the European People's Party, the sort of centre-right grouping, as well as further right parties like the ECR and whatever the new far-right grouping is called. I can't actually remember what they're called now. So she made that announcement, and then immediately there was backlash from the sort of centrists and the centre-left and the Greens, who sort of formed the coalition that elected her president again last year, I think. And that sort of threatened the very functioning of her commission, because that centrist, centre-left to centre-right alliance is what has allowed the commission to govern for the last few decades. So after that backlash, the commission then said, okay, well, there's still an open door, right? We'll proceed with the legislation if there's a specific amendment about small businesses. If we get rid of that amendment, we'll go ahead with it. I don't actually know whether this will eventually pass or not, but I think just the whole saga shows that von der Leyen isn't actually in control, isn't in as much control as a lot of people might think she is. And these attempts to appease the right wing by sort of watering down green legislation that she's been doing the last few years is starting to rub up against the groups that actually are the foundation of her support in Europe. So it puts her in a bit of a difficult position, and I think her image has been tarnished.
Yeah, that is interesting. She's falling there from the just straight up positive section to the lightly positive section, an increasingly crowded tier.
Yeah.
For 3 people move into that tier today. You obviously mentioned the fact that she has this reputation for being the Queen of Europe, which is a title I'm sure she enjoys. She said people are saying it. I think she's stopping them. She's on her business card. But there has been a real shift in how kind of the European Commission is treated, and like her predecessors haven't necessarily had quite the same aura and vibe that she has. And do you think this is kind of a reset of things, that like there can never be a Queen of Europe because of how Europe works and all these different conflicting interests? Or do you think this is a particular failure in this instance?
I think this... that's a tough question.
Thank you.
Well,
that's what I'm aiming for.
Yeah.
Trying to catch you out.
I I mean, this is obviously like a fight over one specific piece of legislation, but it is actually just part of a broader battle over the Green Deal, the European Green Deal, which was her like flagship thing that she introduced. So yeah, I think it's the question that's going to sort of define where the EU goes from here, because if it does want to integrate more, unify more, you do need an office, a position that does that sort of power is centered around. I don't think that division of power between the Commission, the Council and the Parliament can be perfectly equal if you want further integration towards something that looks more like a federal Europe. So I think, it is an inevitable fight that different groups and different bodies will push back against her. But as for how it ends, I don't really know. Yeah,
and whether it ends with her or not. I think you're right. There is an inevitability towards the fact that you kind of need these kind of figureheads if you're going to have a Europe that people look towards for more broad leadership.
Yeah.
But whether she will become, well, she's on her way to it, obviously. She's the Queen of Europe. But whether she is the first to really take up that mantle, I guess we don't fully know yet. But we do need people for thumbnails. We need like a face of Europe.
I mean, it's like, with this leaderboard, she gets moved around when Europe as a continent has a win or a loss.
It's the closest Europe has to a like continental leader.
Yeah.
And as you say, I suppose, though, this is reflective also of parliamentary politics in the rest of the world too, right? Like, you have these disagreements, these fallouts over policy, you try and compromise to one side or other. Seems like her coalition is falling apart a little bit, but maybe too soon to tell whether it's truly all over for the Queen of Europe. I suspect not.
Well, there's also, as well, just I'll quickly mention that she may be getting taken to court by the Parliament, which is also just another sign of how the Commission and the Parliament aren't really, well, not how they're working against each other, but there's conflicting interests on both. But it's another flagship project. Like Rory said, her Green Deal was a flagship project. This is a new one, which is her 150 billion euro defence deal. She might be taken to court by the Parliament for, I'm not exactly sure of the details, but for essentially going over the heads of other MPs to push that piece of legislation through. So very dictatorial. I don't know vibes or as no, not true. But that's
not dictatorial, but I know what you mean. Like, it's similar to like presidential powers in a lot of countries. The US, a clear example, obviously. Over time, one person accumulates more and more power because it allows them to act in a way that's kind of quick and efficient and all these things. And you can see the advantage of that, but equally it does seem that, unlike in the US, the Parliament is pushing back and saying, we don't want this. You're right.
Checks on power.
Yeah, and it seems like that will be interesting to see how that shakes out, because that probably to some extent answers the question Rory was answering previously of how much power will one person be allowed to accumulate. And right now, it does seem that some of her sparkle is being taken away from the Queen of Europe. Let's move on to your person, Nadja. Who is your loser of the week? And will we describe them as a queen?
One might.
I know who it is. And one would not.
Okay. I really hope I do start with justice now. Ben, if you're listening.
Stop listening.
Stop listening. Okay. I'm a bit rough, but all right. My loser of the week is the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. Yes, he's being moved down. The main reason being is that he is facing what some might say the biggest rebellion to his leadership after 1 year in Downing Street.
We might say a video released over the weekend.
Whoa, so go check that out. But yes, he's essentially been having to grapple a large-scale Labour rebellion. It's over a plan to essentially slash welfare spending, which many Labour MPs have said the ones who've been rebelling against him will just push more people into poverty, which is against the kind of core values, moral values that Labour stands for.
Sure.
So it all kind of started back in March when the Secretary for the Work and Pensions introduced the new benefits bill, which essentially makes it harder for people who are disabled to get certain types of benefits, which are, I forgot the name, PIP, personal independent payments.
Yeah,
sorry. Make it harder for them to access PIP. and also made a few other changes. One of them being that young people who are under 22 and are on universal credit can't access PIP as well at the same time. Now, the bill was really badly received. Despite the fact that Starmer has a massive majority in Parliament, which he won this time last year, around over 100, I think 120 or something, MPs decided to sign a wrecking motion, is what it's called. A wrecking motion essentially the bill is supposed to go into its second reading, where it'll be voted upon next Tuesday. But the wrecking motion kind of puts a halt to all of that and is a massive sign of protest against Starmer and his leadership. Now, Starmer has reacted quite defensively against this kind of move against him. He's even termed the wrecking motion as saying it's not a no confidence vote. So that kind of shows how kind of scared he is that this vote is maybe going through, and he's trying to say, it's not against my leadership, guys. It's not that big of a deal, but it clearly is a pretty big of a deal. And there was essentially two things Starmer could have done. One was to just scrap the bill entirely, which he hasn't done. The second way he could have gone down was to make massive amendments to the bill, big concessions, which as of Friday, so today's Friday morning, he has done. So he went through loads of emergency meetings with those Labour MPs who have been rebelling against him. And he's decided to scale back on a lot of the commitments that the bill originally outlined, including the most important concession is that people currently receiving those benefits those benefits won't be retracted from them. So there'll be new legislation, there'll be new criteria in the next year, but those currently on them won't be taken away from them. So they still have them. Only changes going forward, exactly. Okay, interesting. So that's this. So even though he might have kind of avoided, if the vote had gone through next Tuesday and it completely failed and flopped, which is likely now probably won't happen because he's managed to get a lot of MPs on his side with these concessions. It would have been a pretty disastrous thing for him to lose on such a scale. But at the same time, even if the vote does go through, it's still a massive kind of blow to his leadership and is reflective of the kind of dynamics and the power struggles within his Labour leadership. A lot of his MPs are unhappy with the way things are going. Many feel like they don't have a platform to voice their opinions on policies and things going forward, and it looks like will only get worse for Starmer going forward. So he is, after a long 3-minute observation, he's my loser of this week.
Okay, Keir Starmer, loser of the week, already at the bottom of the board, so he shall be staying there, but we'll be adding a -1 next to him to indicate the fact he is whacked up against the bottom of the board and been unable to move. I think what's most notable here, as you say, is the fact that this is the first major rebellion of this scale. Like, obviously, there's been disagreements within Labour to this, to other things, especially when it comes to kind of finance and Starmer and Reeves's ambitions to kind of get growth and limit spending and all these things. And I mean, Starmer would argue that they were necessary in order to set them up to do all the great things they want to do in the future. But there's clearly been some conflict there, that there was some optimism among Labour MPs. They would come in and do a whole bunch of like great, more left-wing things, and so far haven't. And this is the first time we've kind of really seen that materialise, the kind of disagreement in the kind of party Labour wants to be. What do we think this tells us about Starmer's prospects going forward and the kind of attitude you have to take? Because you might expect a Prime Minister with a majority like his and a relatively fresh mandate like his to kind of just buckle down and just say, well, this is what we're doing, we're getting on with it. But that's clearly not what he's doing. He clearly is more concerned than that. So what do we think this suggests is going to happen going forwards when it comes to Starmer and Labour more generally?
I think, if you just sort of separate, obviously the policy issue is the core of this rebellion, but I think another big part of it is that a lot of Labour MPs are really unhappy with his leadership style. There's a lot of reports by various journalists saying they've talked to Labour MPs and rebels who say they don't have enough, conversation back and forwards with number 10. They don't get enough. Their input isn't heard. Their worries and complaints aren't heard. And I think that it's quite strange because Starmer was sort of presented as, yes, he might be a bit boring, but he's managerial and that's his talent. He's managing people. But this has sort of demonstrated that might not be the case. So I think, these concessions are one thing, but going forward, if he wants to keep people on side, he really needs to change his approach, I think. And a lot of people point to Morgan McSweeney, who's his, I want to say, chief of staff, as being the sort of man behind the operation. And, maybe gets to a point where if Starmer really feels in trouble and he wants to sort of look like he's taking a fresh new approach, maybe that's who he gets rid of. But I haven't seen any indication of that so far. But yeah, I think just policy aside, it really demonstrates that he's going to need to take a change in sort of attitude. But I mean, also on the policy thing, like that is a really difficult one, because now it leaves the sort of calculations that the Treasury have done have completely changed, because they're cutting less money with this bill. So that's going to be a bit of a headache going forwards. But don't know how they're going to square that one.
I think one of the people, like you mentioned, Morgan Sweeney, he could be he could be one of the people that Keir Starmer looks to. But also, I think some people have mentioned that Reeves might be another person that I have to go. There was this whole problems with the winter fuel allowance and just in general her whole economic policy for growth, as you mentioned yourself, has just not been taken very well by a lot of MPs, both from Labour and on other sides of the parties as well, and British people. One more thing as well that I think a lot of the Labour MPs are rebelling against, which, like Rory said, policy aside, and also aside from the fact, which Rory again went into, is the whole kind of leadership style of Keir Starmer, and the fact that, with a landslide majority of 400 MPs and him not knowing probably half their names, it's a bit difficult to, steer the ship, or what's that, drive the ship, rock the ship, when you don't know like half of the people who are on board. But it's also this kind of whole, obviously this welfare benefit, these reforms, this was something that I think was portrayed as, we're going to go into this, we're making these cuts and that's that. We're making the difficult decisions to reform everything. It's going to be done. And obviously that's not the way it turned out, not a great look for him, but it also points to, I think, a wider kind of perception that Labour's strategy has been to kind of fend off reform and to put in these kind of these harsh policies to just to show, we're a strong government, we can do this. But I think a lot of Labour MPs are thinking about the fact that, it's not just reform we have to worry about. There's Lib Dems, there's the Greens, they're on the rise as well. There's, there's loads of different directions that our policy needs to be centered around, not just necessarily fending off reform, which is in the polls, it's leading, I don't know what's the majority now between reform and Labour. Not the majority, but the polling in between the two. It's massive. He's got a lot of turbulent months and days ahead of him for sure.
Well, be interesting who does get, because you've chucked a couple of suggestions in. We'll see. But for the moment,
just my humble opinion.
Yes, just your advice to the Prime Minister. For the moment, though, Starmer isn't the one being cut. He is just being bashed up against the bottom of the board. However, that doesn't mean that it's all over for Starmer. Things could get worse as we move into the ultimate winner and loser of the week. Okay, so the way this works is each of us now get to vote for our ultimate winner and ultimate loser of the week from the people we've already discussed in this episode. If we have consensus, then the person moves up or down again. If we don't have consensus, nothing happens and we all go home unhappy. Our options for our ultimate winner this week are Kim Jong-un or Zelensky.
It's been a rough week.
Really tough one.
Our options here are not great on any count, I don't think.
I sort of hope we all have different answers, so no one moves.
Well, let's find out. Rory, who is your ultimate winner this week?
I've gone for Kim Jong-un.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't want to say any more.
You've already said enough?
Yeah.
Yep, Kim Jong-un as well.
Well, good news, Rory. I went to Zelensky. I just couldn't. We can't put Kim Jong-un up again.
It was scandalous.
And also, Zelensky has had a good week. Like, he's had a real reaffirmation of support from Europe, as you said, the increase in defense spending, and also like a brightening of his relationship with Trump. I mean, how long will it last?
Yeah.
But like for the
few
moment,
hours.
this week, it's
Yeah.
Zelensky's had a nice one.
I also think with everything I said about Kim, I always feel like I'm sort of on using first name terms there, but you know,
You two are close.
but it's not like had the US not bombed Iran that he was just going to give up his nuclear weapons. Like
True.
whatever happened this week, he was going to press ahead, to be fair.
Okay, your options for ultimate loser of the week. Let's see if we can do unanimity on this one. Mark Rutte, Ursula von der Leyen, and Keir Starmer. I don't feel confident we're going to get unanimity on this one. I don't think there's a
I don't
clear...
know how to spell Keir.
Oh, well, I think we know you're voting for. You worked out how to spell Keir?
I think so.
Rory, who have you gone for?
I've gone for Keir Starmer. I was tempted by von der Leyen, but I just think it's been one of his worst weeks.
That's fair.
Starmer's worst weeks so far.
Yeah, I agree with Rory. I was also
No.
I've got to. He's friends with Kim Jong-un.
He's so down low already.
He's already at the bottom, -1. What's the
doesn't
point?
it?
Why are we hitting him more?
Yeah.
I did basically for that reason. I thought he's already at the bottom.
Okay, good.
He's like on -1 already. For Rutte, purely for the daddy comments.
Yes.
We can't stand for that. We need to put a firm line in the sand.
No
You can't call Trump daddy. It's a slippery slope.
Setting a precedent, right?
It's a horrible precedent. And I think us as a podcast should have come out firmly against it. And I'm frankly disappointed we didn't. Anyway, that is all for today. This is how the leaderboard looks at the end of today's episode. Couple of new faces. Fun to have some new faces on there. If you want to see more new faces next week, you can make that happen by commenting on this video who you want to see us add or move next week. Obviously, you can choose someone you want us to move instead, someone already on the board. But also, you could add a new face if you'd like. The top comment by the time we record next episode will decide who is added to the board. So let us know what you think. Upvote the people you like in the comments already and have your say. That's all for now.
Yeah.
Join us again next week when we rank more people and we continue to not support Trump being called daddy.
Yeah.